All right, I always say that Friday is the best day of the week here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, but I usually say that because it's our mailbag edition. When you guys ask lots of questions, we answer as many of them as we can, and it's great. I always have a lot of fun putting together these Friday mailbag editions of the Morning Pitt, except today, on this Friday, on May 3rd, 2024, we're not doing a mailbag edition of the Morning Pitt. As you've already seen from the headline, we've got a special guest today on the Morning Pitt. It's Pitt basketball coach Jeff Capel. I had a chance yesterday to sit down with Jeff Capel and talk with him about a lot of topics. Maybe not everything I wanted to get to, because we ended up talking for a long time. I probably could have talked for another 15 or 20 minutes, maybe even longer, just breaking down lots and lots of different things. But there were obviously a lot of topics we wanted to cover, a lot of things we wanted to talk to Jeff Capel about. It ended up being a wide-ranging conversation that went pretty long. And so what we're actually going to do, in order to maximize the content and stay within the time frames that we generally have for these Morning Pitt episodes, we're going to break it up. So today is part one of the Capel conversation, and barring any major breaking news that would demand our attention on Monday, we'll get part two then. And if there's something that comes up over the weekend and we got to talk about it on Monday, then we'll have part two of the Capel conversation on Tuesday. But either way, it's going to be worth the wait. I think you'll enjoy what we have to talk about today, what Jeff Capel had to say. I think you'll enjoy what he says in part two as well when that comes next week. And of course, we'll have articles on Panther-Lair.com with a lot of this stuff. In addition, if you don't want to just watch the video, you want to hear or read what he said, and have my little witty inputs, in prose. We'll have articles as well on Panther-Lair.com. But I really wanted you to hear from Jeff Capel because he continues to be one of the more insightful coaches that you can find to interview, whether he's talking about himself, talking about his program, talking about the state of college sports, or really just about any topic. I'm pretty sure Jeff Capel is a pretty interesting guy, a pretty smart guy, and a pretty insightful guy, and he's always got something that's worth hearing. I've often said, it was tough in those first few years when Pitt was pretty bad, and they were struggling under Capel. I remember thinking, boy, if they could just put it together, this guy could be one of the faces of Pitt athletics and the kind of guy that you wanted to hear from about, certainly about his program, but about the athletic department overall, about Pitt, and about the state of college basketball and college sports. And fortunately, for those of us who interview him, and I think for those of you who follow it, they've won in the last 2 years, and they've had two successful seasons. And now it's sort of even, I feel like he's opened up even more. I feel like he was under a lot of fire, a lot of it self-induced over those first few years, and he wasn't always all that interested in expounding on topics, I should say. But in the last 2 years, he has been, and I think it's been to our benefit because it's interesting to hear from him. And so today, you're going to hear from Jeff Capel about a number of topics. We're going to hear about that Selection Sunday snub and what it meant to Capel, why he thought they got left out of the NCAA tournament, why he thought they should have made the NCAA tournament, how he handled the news, how his players handled the news. There's some really interesting stuff in there. We're going to talk about Bub Carrington and Bub Carrington's journey to the NBA draft, which is interesting for perspective on Carrington, but I think it's also interesting for perspective on how Capel handled the situation and how it looked from his perspective. Then we're talking about some of the players who decided to return this offseason and this phenomena of guys announcing their return and how that sort of reinforces the idea that everybody really is on the market, that everybody really does have a decision to make. It's interesting stuff, and it's interesting to hear from Capel about what he thought on all those topics and more. And like I say, we'll even go into more topics next week. This was such a long, it ended up being about a 40-minute interview. And so I thought, we typically do about 20 minutes here on the Morning Pitt. Let's break it up. And it sort of broke up nicely topically where we ended up splitting into two. So I think you'll enjoy today's conversation with Jeff Capel, the part one of the Capel conversation. And I think you'll definitely enjoy part two when we have that next week. But for now, check out my conversation with Pitt head basketball coach Jeff Capel. Well, I don't think, obviously we talked to you on Bub's Day, but that's the only time we've talked to you since the season ended. So I was kind of curious, going into Selection Sunday, I don't want to say, had you sort of made your peace with it, but had you gotten your head around the idea of this might not happen for us? What was your mindset that day?
Yeah, I did. With everything that happened on Saturday. and with all the teams that we needed to lose when they won, I kind of felt like that we were going to be one of the teams that were left out. I think there was a small glimmer of hope, like very, very small, that there would be some people in the room that would get it right and would not just look at numbers or what a computer says, but would look at, our body of work and really how we were playing. If you look at it, if you compare the last 2 years, this year I thought the numbers were better, but even more, I thought we were playing better down the stretch. And so I guess that's the only glimmer of hope that I had, was that maybe someone would take that into account. But it was really hard because our guys were very hopeful. I think all of us felt like we were deserving. But when we got together Sunday to watch the selection show, that's probably one of the hardest things I've ever experienced as a coach, is to watch that hope drain from our guys and to see it in real time. And then to have to get in front of them and talk to them, and knowing that that was the last time that group was going to be together. And so that was really difficult.
What kind of message do you even have in that situation?
I just told them that, I was proud of them, that life isn't fair. We had done everything that we needed to do. We wouldn't have been in the position that we were in if we hadn't struggled early. Like, that was part of our journey. We had to figure ourselves out. And so we wouldn't have been in that position where we were a top 4 team in the ACC, where we had a double bye, where we won a game. We're in the semifinals of the ACC tournament, where we're able to go on the road and beat Virginia and break their winning streak. We wouldn't have been in that position and been the team that we were at the end if we didn't go through those struggles. So those were necessary. And we did not make it because of something earlier. It was just subjective and, computers and analytics and things like that. I told them I wanted them to be proud of what we accomplished. We took another step forward. We laid a great foundation these 2 years of, adding bricks and solid foundation, and just move forward with our heads held high.
Was there any consolation over the next week or 2 weeks? You guys were like the poster child of like teams that got, basically got screwed, and as the tournament unfolded, you would be the team that got brought up a lot. You and a couple others.
Honestly, not for me, because I didn't really watch. I just kind of went dark. My family and I, my kids were on spring break. We left and went to the beach. We Selection Sunday, I think Wednesday, we were headed to North Carolina to the beach. And when we got there, I just kind of sequestered. We watched movies. We played our games that we play, card games, board games. And I just hung out with family and just tried to decompress. I didn't really want to watch the games. I totally unplugged from social media. I do that during the season anyway. And I tell my staff, if there's anything I need to know, let me know. So it didn't really hit me. A couple times, like I watched one of my best friends is the head coach at Northwestern. So I watched a little bit of their game, and that was a little bit frustrating because I'm watching it. And it's no disrespect to Chris, but I thought we were better than both teams. And it's just, the one thing I will say is that looking at the run that NC State went on, there is a part of me that's, okay, what if we got in? Because I felt if we got in, we would have won, because I just felt that we were playing so well and our guys were really confident. The freshmen weren't freshmen anymore. Bub was playing at a really high level. Jalen was playing at a really high level. Obviously, Blake all year had been ish. I just felt like that we could have won, and that's the hardest part of it.
Has that been your approach every year when a season? I mean, obviously you've had seasons that end in the best possible way, but pretty much other seasons when they end with a loss or miss the tournament or whatever, is that your approach, to just turn it off, not follow the tournament?
No. This is the first time it's
really?
ever. Yeah, it's the first time it's ever. I had no desire to watch basketball. It's probably the first time that I can remember in my life. I mean, I grew up watching the NCAA tournament, like locked in. Once it started on Thursday and Friday, and when I was real little, my parents occasionally would let me pick me up early from school. The game started at noon, so it's been a big part of my life. But this year, I just felt no desire because I felt like we should have been a participant.
Yeah. Wow. So then, obviously, the Bub thing. You talked about this a little bit the day he made his announcement, but when did it really hit you of like, this might be just a 1 year thing? I think you said maybe even over as far back as the summer, you were like, this might be a real possibility.
Well, I thought he was really good when we recruited him and when we got him. And for me, I've never really paid attention to rankings. Especially, I think that's one of the things that hurt me when I was the head coach at Oklahoma. I was so busy trying to prove that I could recruit in a different region. When I took that job, I was 31 years old, and there were a lot of questions about me with the job, and especially I'd never recruited that part of the country. And obviously Texas was going to be a big area that we needed to recruit. There's so many players in Texas. And being young and being naive, I didn't hire anyone on my staff from Texas. And so immediately it was said that, well, he's not going to be able to recruit Texas. In the next 2 years, we got the best players in Texas. But it wasn't the best thing for our team. So that's, for me, when the rankings kind of went out. I recruited a kid at VCU that I'm not sure he was ranked. He was a point guard, and I remember watching the number one point guard in that class that year at one of these camps. And I remember thinking, like, my guy is better than him. And my kid ended up being the 24th player taken in the draft. And so it's never really mattered. And so I knew that he was really good. But again, you don't really know a kid until you're with him. When he got here in the summer, I saw the work ethic. I saw how he was a gym rat. And then when we started working with him, probably in late June, second session of summer school, I had seen that he had grown a little bit already. And then you get out there with him, and that's when I saw like how smart he is, how quickly he picked things up. When we started in September and as we got into October, I think that's when I started to think like, this could go faster. Now, I never thought one and done, but I thought this could go faster than I thought. And one of the big reasons, again, was how smart he was, how quickly he picked things up. And even by then, he had grown more. And when we started the season, obviously the triple-double the first game, but then the first 4 games. And then when we played Florida, he struggled in the first half, but then he figured things out in the second half, and he played really well in the second half. And so I think that's when I started to, you started to hear rumblings, and we started to have more NBA people wanting to come to practice. And I knew then that there was going to be a great chance, if he wanted to pursue this after 1 year. So when the season was over with, Bub and I met, and he was sitting right there where you're sitting, and just talked about the season, talked about the things he did well, talked about our team. And then I asked him, what are you thinking? And he was like, honestly, Coach, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I've let my dad take care of that. I've just been focused on this. And I said, well, what I'll do is that I'm going to get information, real information, because these young people, man, they hear so much stuff. And I'm able to get real information. And I was in constant communication with his father about all of this stuff. And I probably talked to 20 to 25 NBA teams, front office people, scouts, whomever. And I think Bub made his announcement on a Wednesday. His father called me Saturday before that to let me know the plan of what they were going to do. And it was really important for his father to do a press conference. So normally in that situation, we would normally just release a statement and wishing him well and things like that. But Lil Bub had such a great experience, and his family had such a great experience one of the things his dad said to me was like, I want him sitting up there with you, beside you, and I want him to share how he felt about this place, how he feels about this place, and the impact that you guys had on him. That's why we did the press conference. And he was able to get up there, and I was amazed, when right before we walked in the room, I hadn't seen Bub since we played North Carolina, or since that meeting. Mm-hmm. We played North Carolina on a Friday. I think I met with Bub on either that Monday or Tuesday. I hadn't seen him since then. And when I saw him when Gary walked in, the first thing I said to him was like, yo, you've grown more. And I was amazed at him. Like, he had no notes. It was like he had crossed this bridge and understood, like, okay, this is real business now. And so I'm going to conduct myself like an adult, not like an 18-year-old. And I thought he was unbelievable in the press conference.
Yeah, he hit all the main notes. He knew what he wanted to say, and he was very, very clear about it. When he has the triple-double, I mean, does something sort of click for you as a coach? Like, okay, we got to watch out now. Not you have to watch out, but like, you're going to start hearing about how you're an NBA guy. It's going to be something. Teams are going to focus on you now. You're going to go from being, somebody said, like, go from being on the scouting report to being the scouting report. Like, what did you have to change how you handled him, approached him after that game?
Well, I wanted to protect him. That was the main thing.
Right.
Not necessarily after the first one. It was more after the first four. Mm-hmm. That's when the noise became even louder. I mean, obviously, after the first game, you have a triple-double. He's the first guy since Dennis Scott in this league to do that. And there have been some really, really good freshmen in the ACC, in the history of the ACC. So obviously that was loud. We came back to practice, and I probably jumped him the next practice just to make sure he was level. The one thing I kept telling him was that you are an unbelievable teammate. Don't change. Because your teammates are going to watch and see if you change. Don't become a jerk. Don't become an asshole. Don't start thinking that, like, I'm like that. And so after the fourth game, I met with him to talk about that in greater detail. And one of the things I told him is that I've coached a lot of freshmen that were one and done or had a chance to be one and done. One of the amazing things about those guys, they never talked about it. And some of those guys knew when they came into college they were one and done, but they were so immersed in what they were doing in the present. They were present with their team, their program, school, the university, and things like that. And so I talked to him about that. I talked to him about continuing to be a great teammate. The reason why all these guys want you to get a triple-double or so happy is because you're a great teammate. They're going to be looking now to watch. And then I had a conversation with his parents just to talk about how do we protect them, because not only is Bub's life going to change, his family's life is going to change. The first time I ever went through that was with Blake Griffin, and it was when he was a freshman. It was a little bit later. It was in January. It was our first conference game. And I remember at the time, because Blake was small town Oklahoma, just like Bub is Baltimore, he's Baltimore, but he ain't the Baltimore that his dad grew up in. Like, he was protected Baltimore. Now, he has the toughness of the guys from Baltimore have and the competitive spirit, but just want to protect him because I knew people were going to be coming at him from all kind of different angles. So that's what we tried to do from that point on.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, back, like, it used to be, I'm just going to double check that. It used to be when the offseason came, you watched for, like, announcements like that, like, oh, who's going into the NBA draft? And then started, you had to keep an eye on who's going into the transfer portal. And I was cracking up the other day because it's now you're watching for guys who are announcing that they're not doing anything. Guys announcing they come in. I mean, you've had it, and we saw it in football, and it's all over the place. Do you just shake your head at that, or is that that's just where we're at? Like, you have to announce that you're not doing anything.
It's just where we are, man. I don't necessarily understand it, but it's the nature of where we are. Because there's so much speculation. I mean, I'm sure there was all kind of speculation about our team, as the season wound down, and is Jalen going to come back? Is someone going to be able to pay him more, give him more? Is Ish going to come back? Is, probably those two more than anyone, I would assume. And so we started, to be honest with you, we started preparing for that in January. We started as a staff having talks and meetings and communication with parents and things like that to try to stay ahead of things and to make sure the relationship is good enough where they want to come back, the experience is good enough where they want to come back. Now, one of the things that's interesting is that these kids, they love doing it. We did, I think Jalen was first, did a graphic and things like that. I think Ish was next, and then we did one from Zach, and we never thought that the twins weren't coming back. They were up here every day talking. They're like, when's our graphic coming out? And so it's just these kids, like, they love social media. They love to post. They love to interact. They love to be able to post themselves and pictures and moments and things like that. So that part of it's cool, but just the speculation runs rampant if you don't do anything. And so it's just an interesting time right now. It's different, but it's very interesting.
Well, and all those posts like that, it just sort of creates a feeling of like, I guess everyone's on the market. You know what I mean? And that's to your point about that in January, you have to prepare for the possibility that everybody's on the market, right? I mean,
it's we're pro sports now without any rules. And so what I mean by that, in the NBA, first and foremost, every year you have a draft. And so you're able to draft players. Once you sign a guy, a first round pick, they're on a rookie contract. The contract, I think I'm right about this, is 4 years. 2 years are guaranteed. And then after that, the team has the option to pick up the last 2 years. So if I'm a franchise, I know if I draft you and I like in the first round, I'm going to have you for 2 years. So I don't have to worry about that. And if you play well and I like you, I'm going to have you for 4 years. For those 4 years, I know what your contract is. I know all of that stuff. And then after that 4 years, based on how you performed, is what your next contract will be. Will you become a restricted free agent? Will you become an unrestricted free agent? What does the market tell? Because there's a market up there. If you're a starting point guard, there's a number for that. If you're a scorer and a guy that can put up 20 a game, for us, it is every year. You don't really know what the market is. The market is constantly changing. And so what I've said over and over, like, look, it's different. It's completely different from what I have grown up. I've grown up in basketball. From the time I was in 6th grade, my dad was a college coach. So I was around college programs, whether it was at Wake Forest for those 3 years, and he was a Division II coach, and then I went to college. And so I've been engulfed in that. This is totally different from anything, from my experience in 6th grade. How old are you? 13, 14 years old. So from that until I'm 49 now, so about 46, this is the way things were. Now all of a sudden they're different. So you have to adapt. I say all the time, you have two choices. You have to adapt or you need to get out because it's not changing. And so that's what we've had to do. We've had to adjust. We've had to adapt. It requires more communication. It requires more alignment, with our staff, with administration, collective, all of those things. And it provides you a different way to recruit.
Good stuff there from Jeff Capel. I like that setting where we're just sort of relaxed. We're sitting in his office and we're just talking. And I like that you could kind of see in that window of his office, the background, the reflection of the Pitt basketball logo. Actually, that window looks out over the court where I think last night at the Peterson Event Center, there was a concert. It was like Death Cab for Cutie and Postal Service or whoever. At my age, I should have probably listened to those bands at some point in the last 20 years, but I never really did. But the stage was like being built right out there. I mean, you could turn to the, from where Capel was sitting, you could turn to the right and look out and see the stage being built. From where I was sitting, you could turn to the left. So it was sort of an interesting setting for that conversation. But I think with most interview subjects, you get them in that kind of setting where they're just sitting in their office. It's one-on-one. You're just relaxed. You're sitting back. You saw he sat back in his chair for a while and actually kind of made the audio a little bit harder to hear, so I apologize for that. But I mean, we're just sitting in chairs. We're sitting across the desk from each other, just having a little conversation. It's not like the press conference setting. And while I think Jeff Capel does really well in the press conference setting, I think he's even more sort of open to talking in this kind of setting, the setting that we had yesterday. So I hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was really interesting, and I'm going to write an article about this. The idea that Jeff Capel, a lifelong basketball junkie, spent his whole life watching college basketball, loving college basketball, being part of college basketball, didn't watch the tournament this year. Like, was so disgusted about Pitt getting left out of the NCAA tournament that he just didn't even watch. I like, that might have been one of the most interesting revelations there. Although, I mean, I think a lot of the stuff about Bub Carrington was really interesting. A lot of the stuff about kind of how players approach the transfer portal in the offseason now. I mean, like, there were a lot of interesting topics there. But I really think that whole thing about him just not even, just really being that disgusted by the whole situation and that disappointed by the whole situation of getting left out of the NCAA tournament that he just didn't even watch. I think there were probably a few Pitt fans who took the same approach. There probably were, right? All right. Thanks to Jeff Capel for joining us. Thanks to you for watching that. Believe me, you're going to enjoy part 2. You'll check that out next week. And we'll have snippets of part 2 and part 1 on Panther-Lair.com throughout the weekend with some articles and things like that. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the Pitt sports coverage you can handle. If you liked that interview, then like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we put all of our Pitt video content. The Pitt fans are going to be talking about this video and this interview, though, on the message board. So that's the place to go if you're a Pitt fan. You want to talk to other Pitt fans. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all of the Pitt sports coverage. Thanks again to Jeff Capel. Appreciate it. Thanks to you for watching these videos all week. I hope you've had a great week, and I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. We'll catch up with you on Monday. Again, if there's big news over the weekend, we'll talk about that on Monday. And if there isn't, then we'll have part 2 of the Capel conversation for you. So either way, you're going to want to check it out, The Morning Pitt, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.